5 hosts, 4 divisions, all battling it out for the Holy Grail of the American Hockey League, the Calder Cup. This is the Holy GrAHL Podcast. Here are your hosts, Jeremy Paul, Zack Power, Andrew Rinaldi, Corey Swartz, and Deana Weinheimer.
Well, hello and welcome back. This is episode 40 of Field Pass Hockey's American Hockey League podcast, the Holy GrAHL. Now, another busy week in AHL hockey, and we're just going to get right into the show. But of course, to kick this off and to basically introduce you to our faces and voices once again, we're going to go through the lineup here. And I just have another question for you guys. If you could put an AHL franchise in any city, where would it be and why?
Andrew Rinaldi of the Chicago Wolves and Grand Rapids Griffins beat, in case you forgot this lovely voice of mine. I'm going in the interest of trying to kind of level out the divisions here. I'd like to see a team in Indianapolis, Indiana. Throw the Central a bone after the Pacific's picked up the last couple franchises.
And I'm Corey Swartz. I cover the Hershey Bears and the Springfield Thunderbirds. We're going to be talking about the Thunderbirds a lot on the show here today. But that's a tough question. I feel like there's a lot of good markets that have already been covered. I'd go with the promotion. I've always liked the fans down in South Carolina for the Stingrays. I feel like if a place, I know it's a little bit, it's kind of like the Charlotte syndrome, right? Where it's a little bit more remote than a lot of its, logistical teams as to where it would get placed. So that would be a little bit of a headache, but fans down there are fantastic. The venue down there is great. It's one of my places to get to a game at some point for sure. And I'm South Carolina all the way.
And I'm Deana Weinheimer. The passion for the Nashville Predators is something else. It is quite the scene to go to a game down there. If you haven't, oh boy, you need to. It's a party all night long. And, I just would love to see more hockey down in that central Tennessee, maybe even getting down to like Alabama near Birmingham or someplace down in there. So let's give that area somewhere down in there an AHL team. I know hockey doesn't always work out in Georgia, so let's try some more in Tennessee and Alabama.
Yeah, the Birmingham Bulls have a great following. My name is Zack Power, and I'm a writer here, and I've been here for a couple of seasons now. I'm going to go with something a little off the wall, and I'm actually going to say Saskatchewan. They've been vying for something for a long, long time. The Saskatoon Blades were almost a thing back in the 80s, and they jam-pack every WHL game that they have, and I think that they deserve a shot at a professional hockey league franchise. So I would say either Saskatoon or Regina, you're next on the list.
I like it. The Canadians showing some of the Western Canadian provinces some love there. Can't argue against that, but we're going to move right on into our weekly news recap here. We don't really have any breaking news, but we do have an exciting special guest coming up later on the show. She is a trailblazer in my mind, but Jessica Campbell, the first female assistant head coach in the American Hockey League, currently working with the Coachella Valley Firebirds, is joining us here later on in the show. But let's just move right on into our news recap of the week.
Yeah, and someone who's really blown me away over this past weekend was David Gust, and he's the AHL Player of the Week. Gust has 2 goals and 5 assists through 2 games this past weekend, good for 7 points for the Rockford Ice Hogs. Now, Gust tallied the 2 goals and 5 assists for 7 points on that weekend. On Friday evening, Gust scored twice and added 3 assists for a career high of 5 points, and that's the most an Ice Hog skater has scored in more than 7 years, which is kind of crazy to think about, as Rockford snapped their 3-game losing skid, defeating Chicago 5-3. Then on Saturday, Gust had assist on 2 Rockford Ice Hog power play goals for an 8-2 win over Belleville.
Staying over there in the Central Division, Texas's Alex Petrovic was suspended 1 game as a consequence of cross-checking incident in a game against Grand Rapids on the 29th of October. Now, I know that's my beat, but that Saturday I was in Little Caesars Arena watching the Red Wings, so I didn't really catch this one. But I'm just judging by the games suspended versus an incident earlier this year, like with Clark Bishop, making me think that there might have been some damage, but it wasn't overly egregious, but enough to get him to sit down for Texas's game on Sunday against the Griffins, which resulted in a 4-3 victory for the visiting Grand Rapids Griffins. So can't do that, but I don't think it was as bad as Bishop's, and the numbers don't lie there.
Well, it was a historic night in the AHL on Saturday. For the first time, there were 16 AHL games going on in one day, with at one point 11 games going on at once as all 32 teams were in action. And easily, we're going to be bringing you the highlight of these games here, which falls in the pregame for the Tucson Roadrunners and the San Jose Barracuda, where there was a full line brawl that took place at the opening face-off, where you can see, if we're watching on YouTube, you're seeing a clip of that where a couple of the players, the centers, come together and they're not liking what's happening there, and everybody grabs a dance partner and just gets going here. As the camera, pans around here to a little bit of everybody, it's quite the way to start off the game between these two teams. They're quickly going to be developing a rivalry for sure, if there hasn't been one already. But everybody's got a dance partner, and it continued throughout the game, which was handily won by the Tucson Roadrunners by a 5-1 final score. So it looks like, just based on the score sheet here, that the rough stuff maybe carried over a little bit. There was some roughing penalties assessed more towards the third period, but it seemed like that with a whole line's worth of players, I believe, being caught up in these penalties. There was a lot of game misconducts handed out between both teams. But yeah, just something you don't see very much anymore. I know we talked about fights and goalie fights specifically on the show before, but this is one of the ones you also don't see. And, harkens back to that Rangers 3-a-side fight from a few years ago that, you remember where you were when you were watching that game for sure. But just something you don't see too much anymore with a full online brawl like that anymore.
Can I just say I love the two little kids that came down to bang on the glass on that? That's what we need more of.
The one little kid looked like they were just jazzed. Like, they were so excited. They were just hopping up and down. The other one, I don't think they knew quite what was going on, quite what to do, but, still getting in on it. But I don't know the last time I saw a fight literally before the puck was even dropped, let alone a full line brawl. But that was one of those good hockey fights. It didn't look like anybody really got hurt or anything, but it was enough to send a message. And yeah, wow, what a fight.
Definitely some Calgary versus Vancouver vibes, with Tortorella sending out his guns for sure.
The closest thing that that it reminds me of, that I can remember, at least from my time watching AHL hockey, was there was a time, I'm trying to remember which game it was, during the Hershey-Wilkes-Barre series in 2016. I know it was up in Wilkes-Barre when this happened, but there was almost a fight in warm-ups where both teams came together. There's some great pictures of it still floating around, I think, somewhere. Both teams came together during warm-ups and were exchanging words and shots and stuff like that. And there's a great Twitter exchange between former Hershey antagonist Tom Sestito and I believe it was Liam O'Brien on the other side. And I think Liam won the Twitter war, and when they actually did fight in the next game at the Giant Center, I think that Sestito got the better of the fight, although it was controversial because he was ejected for it too. So there's some great playoff battles. That's the closest thing that I can think of there.
Well, moving on to our last little bit of news here, talking about another vet here, but NHL vet Corey Conacher from nearby Burlington has signed a professional tryout contract, one of those good PTOs, with the Belleville Senators. Now, Conacher, of course, no stranger to the Sens organization, having played 2 seasons for them in the NHL in 2012 and 2013, and then, of course, the following season, 2013-2014. He does have a Calder Cup with Norfolk and 193 games played. Now, of course, he has spent the last few years in Europe mostly in Sweden. Now, this is just a PTO, but you never know if it's going to turn into something more. And wow, what a wealth of experience that would bring if it comes to fruition. And did you know that Corey Conacher was actually a part of the trade that got Ben Bishop down to the Tampa Bay Lightning? As a fan myself, I'll always remember that one. But Corey Conacher, really close to AHL fans' hearts. I'm sure he was, past Les Cunningham Award winner, Dudley Red Garrett Memorial Award, all rookie team in 2011, 2012, second all-star team twice. Of course, we already mentioned the Calder Cup, twice in the all-star game. And then he was the player of the month in November 2018. Come on. Let's get this guy a contract back here in North America.
That was actually during a time when I think Ottawa had Leonard, Bishop, and Elliott, if I remember correctly. So they kind of had that little conundrum, and then like the Hamburglar was in the works, and Anderson was also in the mix. So like there was a time when Ottawa just had a wealth of goaltenders, and it's funny because now they don't really have much to kind of say, or they haven't had much in recent years. So it's kind of amazing that was the guy that they said, you know what, I don't think we should keep you. And it turned out Tobias Lindbergh didn't really fruit too much besides an AHL career for a couple of seasons before heading off to Europe. So
whenever you say Corey Conacher and whenever you say the Norfolk Admirals, I always get instantly nostalgic for the days of making the trip down to the Norfolk Scope and playing the Admirals. It was for so many years a fun trip for Bears fans because the Bears usually had a more fun than I think the Admirals did at the Scope up until the year that the Admirals did hoist the Calder Cup there. So, and it makes me miss them in a lot of ways. There's a lot of just classic teams that the Bears used to play that just aren't there anymore. And you think of the Admirals, the River Rats, the Binghamton Senders, any team from Binghamton, honestly. Just a lot of teams that, gone but not forgotten, and that just makes me nostalgic.
So hello, Editor Deana, checking in on Wednesday, November 2nd. We did record our full episode yesterday on November 1st, but the American Hockey League decided to hand down quite the list of suspensions and fines on Wednesday afternoon. So I just wanted to check in with that list and go through that because this is going to be impacting multiple games coming up over the later part of this week and into this weekend. So just going to start right up the top. So the American Hockey League's Player Safety Committee has announced the following suspensions. First, San Diego Gulls defenseman Josh Healy has been suspended for 4 games as a consequence of a match penalty for an illegal check to the head of an opponent in a game at Abbotsford on October 29th. He will be missing the game on November 2nd, which is Wednesday at Bakersfield, on Friday, November 4th, and Saturday, November 5th versus Milwaukee. And then the final game of his suspension will be November 8th at Henderson. And moving on to the second suspension, Bakersfield Condors forward Dino Cambeets has been suspended for 2 games as a consequence of an illegal check to the head of an opponent in a game at Ontario, also on October 29th. He will miss Bakersfield's game on November 2nd versus San Diego. He will also miss on Friday, November 4th versus Henderson. And then Hershey Bears defenseman Dylan McElrath has been suspended for 1 game as a consequence of his actions in a game versus Lehigh Valley on October 30th. Now, how this one comes about is he was actually assessed an instigator penalty within the final 5 minutes of the third period of that game versus Lehigh Valley. If that happens, you get an automatic 1-game suspension under the provisions of AH Rule 46.21. So as a result, he's going to be missing Hershey's game on Saturday, November 5th at Wilkes-Barre Scranton. Now, you already hear us talk about this big fight that happened between the San Jose Barracuda and the Tucson Roadrunners. Actually, a little bit of fallout has come from that. the AHL's Player Safety Committee also announcing that the Barracuda head coach John McCarthy and the Roadrunners head coach Steve Potvin have both been fined an undisclosed amount as a consequence of their team's actions prior to the start of their game on October 29th. It doesn't specifically say that the fight was that action, but I think we can kind of infer that that's exactly what it is. So that's the latest rundown of all of the moves made by the American Hockey League today. And while we're here, we talk about one signing. Let's go ahead and bring one more, another American Hockey League veteran coming back into the fold with the Belleville Senators signing forward Cole Castles to an AHL deal for the remainder of the 2022-23 season. Now, he did begin the season playing in Sweden and now has cleared AHL waivers on this past Tuesday, so he is all set to go. 8th-year pro, has 355 games under his belt in the American Hockey League with Cleveland, Belleville, Wilkes-Barre Scranton, and Utica. 35 goals, 78 assists for 113 points. No stranger to the Sens. He has 55 games with them between two seasons, 2019 and 20, and 2020-21. So that's it from this update. I'll get you back into the rest of the show. All right, now moving on to the segment we all know and love. Swipe left and swipe right. Rules always remain the same now that we are in a new month. Happy November, everybody. The Super Swipes are back in play. So keep that in mind as you come up with your take. So, of course, alphabetical order. Andrew.
All right. So, doing a little digging around around the standings there on the AHL.com. And in the basement of the Atlantic Division, I saw a couple of familiar faces. That would be Hartford and Lehigh Valley. Now, both these squads, they missed the playoffs last year, and guess what? They're right back down at the bottom of the division. And I got to ask you guys, is there anything telling us that this season's really going to be any different for these two teams? I know it's early, but I don't really see it. I think the Atlantic's going to have the same postseason teams as they had last year. Hartford and Lehigh Valley are, again, probably going to be the odd teams out.
I'll wait to hear what Corey has to say first.
Well, I'm going to go with the swipe left on this one for now. Even though I've said a couple of times in different places that I had Hartford and Lehigh Valley as my teams to actually miss the playoffs this year. So it's a little bit contradictory of me from, my previous standpoints. But to me, it's too early for me to rule them out completely. And, I have a couple of takes I'm having on Lehigh Valley. But, if it weren't for them losing all 3 games this weekend, they're in a totally different place. Even if they get the win on Sunday against Hershey, all of a sudden you're looking at them in Hershey's spot, and Hershey in the bottom, couple of areas there, the division. So, to me, it's just too early to, say even Wilkes-Barre looking legit. I mean, they're up there. They haven't lost a game in regulation, but, it's far from a sure bet that their success is sustainable in some ways. I look at it from a perspective of saying, these teams have been really hot, but let's see when they hit a roadblock here. I think the teams in the middle have sort of already hit that early season roadblock, and that they're coming out of, in a sense, Hershey being one of them. So I still think it's a little bit early to, fully hash out a team's positioning just based on 7 games by and large.
You know what? Wasn't Lehigh Valley near the top of the standings at the beginning? Or am I incorrect in saying that? No.
I think last year they kind of had a similar beginning to the season, and then the bottom fell out pretty much opening weekend, and then that was kind of it for them. This year, I liked what they were doing this year, but Cam York, he took a big injury.
They do have some names that might be able to pull the. I don't know, because I think that the as we learned last year, it's such an unpredictable division, right? We talked so much about it last year and how the race was there, and we were recording and the standings were literally changing from someone going from second to 4th or 5th. Right. And this is why I don't want to rule out anything. Hartford, I could probably do it. I just see no future with them. Right. As of right now, I see no future for the playoffs. But Lehigh Valley, I'm not considerably sold on. I think that they might have some kind of a push in them. So I'm going to swipe left.
Zach's putting more stock on a team that's on a 3-game losing streak as opposed to the team that has a 2-game winning streak right now.
He sure is.
He's thinking long term. He's not blinded by the bikini pictures on the profile.
Well, I go through every picture and I make sure that your Spotify music is good, right? Because you link that nowadays. You got to have a good bio. And if you're not verified, you're not coming with me. And it's got to have at least 4 pictures. So this is what I'm saying.
Yeah, if your Spotify is just telling me all Taylor Swift, that's a hard swipe left.
Oh, no. We just lost a few viewers.
All hate for that new album.
We just lost a few listeners, I think.
Sorry, Tay-Tay.
I'm not a big Taylor Swift fan, but I've been enjoying the new album, I will say. Anyway. You know what? I'm just looking at all these other teams and I don't see how Hartford and Lehigh Valley can jump them. I'm going to have to be the lone wolf here, I guess. And siding with Andrew. I'm going to swipe right on this one.
I got one. All right, I'll take one.
Well, my take for the week is also Lehigh Valley centric. So, we're sticking right in the Atlantic Division here. And I am not 100% sold that if the Phantoms can't turn it around, and I still think that there's room for them to turn it around yet, that Ian LePerriere is not in the hot seat behind the bench. Because, to a degree, I think last season he got a mulligan just because of how weird of a year it was in Philadelphia. Although the Flyers are typically an organization that values their, alumni that get jobs, in the organization. LePerriere is a guy who, once threw his face in front of a puck that ultimately, led to the team's lone appearance in the Stanley Cup Finals since the turn of the century. It's just not enough for me to say, hey, should we be looking in that area? Should his seat be hot? And, they may be liking what he does enough in terms of player development, but I'm not convinced that his seat's not going to be at least a little bit warm if the Phantoms have another mediocre season, at least from the folks in Lehigh Valley's perspective, at least.
Now, I know John Tortorella is a coach that, at least while he was in Cleveland, really valued implementing a system that was cohesive from the top down. That way, whenever players would get called up from the AHL affiliate up into the NHL ranks, they would fit right in. It wasn't a hard transition. And his style of hockey is vastly different than what some teams are accustomed to playing. What makes me swipe right on this is that he says it has to be at least a little bit warm. I do think that maybe because of this change in systems and a new head coach up on the NHL level, and they have to make massive changes in game systems if that's the way that John Tortorella is still working. If that is all still the way that everything is, then he might get another mulligan just because of that, but you'd have to think, the seat would at least be a little bit warm. So yeah, I'm going to swipe right just because you put that little caveat in there.
Yeah, I was thinking, I think maybe they give Lappy a little bit of leeway there. I know the defense hasn't really looked great, and they have a couple of good goalies with some not good stats early on. And I think everyone's still kind of learning to adjust to that style, and at that point, and it's okay to kind of maybe still, as long as you're developing the skills and the staff likes what they're seeing, from that standpoint, then maybe some of those losses are a little easier to swallow. So, but if it's gonna be a little warm, yeah, because of course, it's at the end of the day, it's a results-based business, and if I'm following my gut with yes, Lehigh Valley is going to be missing the playoffs, then yes, I'll also swipe right and say that it's going to be a little warm, especially in an expanded playoff format. If you miss the playoffs twice in a row, you know, no matter what kind of progress that your players are making, that's kind of there's going to be some changes made, I think there. Maybe not going to be cause for him losing his job, but you know, there might be a shuffling of the cards and somewhere in the staff that might give the Phantoms a kick.
My worry is about the AHL, and when you kind of talk about a coach going or not, it's a lot more harder than it is in the NHL, right? You know, we like Toronto's a prime example for me, right? Like they're having half of a bad season, and already they're talking about ousting their coach, right? And while I do think that the seat has to be, you know what, a tingling sensation like you got the heated seats on in your car, I don't think that it's time to start pushing the panic button right now. And I'll go completely the same way down the stream as I did with my last swipe, and saying that, you know what, I think that there's not a whole lot of cause for concern. I will say that there is some sort of warmness to that seat because, again, when you talk about the different kinds of coaching play, and I think I remember this vividly back with St. John's when they had their coach there. It starts with an L, left bear. It's going past me right now. But I could find that there was a huge difference between that and of Tyrion, especially in the defensive side of things. And there was a huge adjustment that you did see between these defensemen. But when you kind of translate that, you know, there has to be some sort of synergy. And without that, you know, that's when you start to see those coaching changes. I'm going to swipe left, but I'm hoping that if you open up the app again, that we can kind of rediscuss and you're making a new profile, that I'll probably consider swiping at it again.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I'm a longtime Flyers guy, so like, you know, I really don't want to see LePerriere ousted just on the basis of, you know, he's a former Flyer. I think he's a good dude, you know, all those things. So I mean, I don't want him to, but you know, in a lot of ways, to me, Lehigh Valley is a very proud organization in a lot of ways, and that, you know, their fans want to be competitive. They want to, you know, be vying for the Calder Cup. You know, people there talk about 2018 like it was yesterday in a lot of ways. In the same way, I'm a Bears fan and I talk about 2016 like it was yesterday with making it to the finals and all that sort of good stuff there too. So, you know, when the Phantoms are, you know, they don't like being development puppets, you know, just for a couple of guys to go. But I mean, the Phantoms have some great guys right now. They have Elliot Denoyer, who's doing great. You know, Jackson Cates, Ronnie Addard, Cam York, Samuel Erson, who at one point was, you know, in contention to stay up in Philadelphia. To me, they're far too proud to, you know, stay so humble. And again, you know, it's still early enough that we're talking a couple of wins. They're right back up in the mix. It's still that close.
For sure. So for me, you know, we're kind of talking a little bit about making the playoffs or not, but I've really seen all that I've needed to see. In the Western side of things, the sample size is done. And you can count Calgary out of a championship run at this point. They're going to be in the bottom of the league, and they're going to be fighting off them scraps. And my take is simple, is that they're going to be either first, second, or third not to make the playoffs. We'll be talking about them first, second, or third. And I say this because I've looked at Henderson. And I know that the record is definitely not there for Henderson. But I see little things in their game that I'm like, okay, well, you've at least improved, right? The defensive side of things is something that I looked at, and I'm like, okay, well, they're starting to tighten up the wheel a little bit. But you know what? I'm pushing the panic button on Calgary, because I say this because they had such a strong season last year. How many times did we talk about Stockton and how great they are? And you know what? Dustin Wolf can't be Dustin Wolf forever. Right? At some point, he's going to have to get off of his head, right? Like he's standing on his head right now, trying to keep Calgary afloat, but they're not doing anything defensively. Offensively, they haven't done a whole lot. And so my take is simple: 1, 2, or 3.
1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. 1, I know what you're going here with. We saw what they were last year, and I think we were kind of expecting them to repeat the same. And I know I've said as much, and that's why I'm going to swipe left on this. I mean, how many times have you seen a team that goes on to have success and then they don't start strong off the gate? They've had a heavy early dose of Coachella Valley in their schedule so far, who has just managed to just pound the puck into the net like it's nobody's business. Doesn't matter if it's Wolf or Oscar Dansk in net, too, both very capable goaltenders. And you're right, their defense hasn't been very good, but they have the coach of the year, reigning coach of the year behind the bench. They have a roster that was almost intact from what they had last year. Couple of new faces on the blue line, but I mean, they have some really good two-way forwards up there. I think they're really missing Glenn Gaudin and Justin Kirkland. But as the season rolls on, you're going to get what you're going to get from Pelletier, Phillips, Schwint, Radim Zahornai. Oh, I probably butchered that, but he's the big 6'7" Czech guy that's just been camping out at the front of the net. He's had a good start to the Wranglers season. I think it's just going to take them time for them to really kind of fine tune those points in the game. I don't think Dustin Wolf's going to make another run at goaltender of the year, but I don't think he's going away quietly this season either. And I don't think the Wranglers are. So, yep, I think that's going to be a big left swipe from your boy.
Yeah, I'm probably going to swipe left on this one as well, just because I'm not a believer in small sample sizes just yet. I mean, whenever my mind goes to poor starts, I kind of think of the 2018-19 Bears team that started off and it looked like it was going to be a repeat of the year before. And they turned it around from February, I think it was maybe late January to March or so, where they won or got points in every single game. It was a new franchise record. And, all that's, them putting together the pieces after a lot of changes. So I don't like to rule out any team making a comeback if things can go right on the ice for them. And, I do agree that the pieces are there. If I'd swipe right if the caveat was that they would miss the playoffs altogether. I could get on board with that probably just based on this, small amount of games at this point. But just given, that we're looking at first or second teams eliminated, I'm not that confident on them just yet. Andrew made a lot of great points. I am shocked that they have Radim Zahorna down in Calgary, after he was picked up on waivers by the Flames. And I'm a little shocked that Pittsburgh didn't claim him back in a lot of ways too. It's an interesting, caveat. Usually that's a given that someone's going to claim somebody back, but Ron Hextall, I'm sure, has a strategy for everything, as he so often does. So that's a little bit of a surprise, too. But that's a huge boost for the Wranglers there. So I'm not ready to write them off for that reason just yet.
Just to save our listeners and everybody else from hearing a rehash of what Andrew and Corey just said, I've pulled this card multiple times before. I'm going to continue to pull this card. Just ditto. Yes, I agree with everything they said. Basically, there's too much talent on this team, too little, again, of a sample size to really say, yes, these guys are done for. They've played, 6 games? They have 65, 66 left to go. There's plenty of opportunities. We saw plenty of teams take a run. Charlotte Checkers, for instance, last season, take an absolute run for things at the end, and then they come out on top of their division. They get a bye. You never know what's going to happen. If any team could be and not even necessarily a dark horse, but if any team could make that kind of comeback again, I think Calgary has the capacity to do so. And even if the ice is bad, these guys did it last season. They can do it again this season.
I didn't even mention Brett Sutter in there as their new captain. I mean, with Daddy Daryl just right down the road, there's no way that he's going to let his boy lead this team into
right down the road. They're in the same building. They're right down the hallway.
I mean, he probably doesn't live in the same house. He probably.
Well, I mean, at work, they're in the same building.
That's got to be convenient, right?
Right. Very, very convenient.
And they do play a lot of afternoon games, so you have to think that there's something to do with that as well, right? They're always playing on like a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, so they can get that second game in on the Calgary ice.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, my hot take this week isn't really much of a hot take, but it's basically something I wanted to call attention to. I just want to give massive kudos to the American Hockey League for once again partnering with the NHL and Hockey Fights Cancer to bring support and awareness to Hockey Fights Cancer Month here in November. They have done a total overhaul of the color scheme on their website. Yeah, you know, it's not a big move, but it's just the start of many. And then the and then the AHL announcing all of the Hockey Fights Cancer Month initiatives, including, what did I read? Like 17 teams are going to be hosting some sort of Hockey Fights Cancer Night here in November. And there's of course, all sorts of fundraisers and awareness campaigns and things moving on. As a cancer survivor myself, of course, any awareness to the cause, any funds that are raised to cancer treatment and support of the patients and their families, all of that is always so appreciative. So what I'm saying this week is please educate yourself on any risk factors. Talk to your doctor, see them on a regular basis, use any available screenings that you have access to, and please do not, capitals, bold, italicized, underline, be afraid to advocate for yourself when you feel like something is wrong. Early detection, people say it all the time, but it's true. Early detection saves lives. I'm living proof of it. Just please take care of yourself. We need you around. So I just wanted to kind of use my minute or so for this hot take just to kind of bring awareness to that this week. So
And we're all swiping right on that too.
Yes, I'm just in case I wasn't clear, I'm swiping right on that.
Thank you guys. I appreciate that one for sure. All right, now it's time to introduce this week's special guest.
Our guest this week has secured a special spot in the AHL history as the first female assistant coach in the league, working under Dan Bylsma with the staff of the Coachella Valley Firebirds. Earlier this year, she became the first female coach in history of the IIHF Men's World Hockey Championship when she served as an assistant coach for the German team. She spent the 2021-22 season as an assistant and skills coach with the Nürnberg Ice Tigers of the Deutsche Eishockey Liga, men's top league in Germany, and the Nürnberg Ice Tigers of the and as well as also served with the City Storm and the Chicago Young Americans girls hockey program. A native of Rockinville, Saskatchewan, our guest has played 3 seasons professionally with the Calgary Inferno of the Canadian Women's Hockey League, winning a Clarkson Cup championship in 2016. She started college at Cornell University and represented Canada internationally at several events, including IIHF Women's World Championship and the Four Nations Cup. Please help me welcome Jessica Campbell to the Holy GrAHL. Hey, Jessica, how's it going?
It's going great. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here today. I know your schedule's really busy. You know, your schedule's really travel heavy right now. But I just want to kind of talk about how we got to this point. I mean, I know it's been publicized already, but I do want to talk about that massive barrier that you broke when you were named the first female assistant coach in the American Hockey League. So can you kind of walk us through the process of you getting on Seattle's radar and getting named to the position? And then if you could also just kind of share your feelings, knowing that with this hiring, you are among, I would call, an elite group of women that are breaking barriers across North American professional hockey.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And, you know, for me, my journey in coaching has been a very exciting one as of late. This past year has kind of led in so many different directions internationally, back here, obviously to Seattle. But I guess for me, after I transitioned out of playing, I had a strength as a player in the skating area. And so I dove right away into player development, and I specialized as a power skating coach and developed my knowledge and really dove into that area, working with youth, female, male, junior, which eventually it was with pro athletes and players in the National Hockey League. And so my background the last 4 years has been player development and as a skills coach. And then just in the last 2 years, tactically, I put my focus, behind the bench a lot more. And I'm a big believer in developing players' individual skill set, but obviously it all needs to connect to the game. And so I think that gave me a niche in my position as a skills coach and as a coach, being able to apply both. And I had an opportunity to go coach in Sweden, actually in the SHL. And I spent some time months out there as well. And before I kind of got here, I think being in the SHL, working with the players in Sweden, that led me to getting opportunities working with pro players in North America, back home in Canada. And really, I've just focused primarily on being the best coach that I could be for these players, whether it's working on their skating game or there's the finer areas of their skill. I have always been a believer in just doing the best that I can by way of the players and what they need and adding more value to their game. And thankfully, I think the players have actually been my biggest advocate for me as a coach getting into this position, because I've kept my focus on that and that path. And I guess their testimonies have opened up more doors quicker than I would have expected. But spending obviously the time in Nuremberg, getting behind the bench with someone like Tom Rowe, who's coached in the National Hockey League, he was an advocate. And then obviously that led to the German national team at World Championships, where I was given a pretty big role and responsibility by Tony Soderholm in the federation. And again, those players advocated for me beyond that. I'd worked with Dan Balsma before. So when he reached out, I was very honored and obviously humbled, because for me, my goal is to coach at the highest level. It always has been. And what that path and those timelines looked like wasn't really focus of mine, but I'm very excited. And to be honestly, with the Seattle Kraken, an organization that is so diverse and a very they just pride themselves so much in development, and obviously a new organization. So our job is to develop those prospects and to make sure that we're doing everything we can to develop the best players coming up for Kraken. So I'm excited about my role and knowing that I can bring that to our staff and our team. I guess the last part of your question is just more so, I think the barriers perhaps that you alluded to, for me, I've never really seen those barriers in front of me, because I've just always seen myself as a coach. Yes, I understand that my voice and the perception is maybe perceived a little bit differently at first with the players or the clients, both male specifically that I'm working with. But the reality is we're speaking hockey and the language of hockey. And my job is, like any coach, is to establish that respect. And I think that respect comes from the level of care and investment we put in the players. And I've always made my focus and primary focus is to serve and to be a guide for them to the best, to their best ability. So I'm really thankful to obviously be in this position, and I know that it carries a lot of weight, and I feel that pressure and that weight on my back for sure, just knowing that it is the first. But I'm really focused on pushing those barriers to the side and just staying focused on the work and coaching truly.
Well, you kind of touched on a lot of what I was going to ask you initially there about your background as a power skating coach, and a little bit on the journey to get to this point, having some of the prior connections, just from working with so many people. But how much has that carried over into your current role so far this season with power skating? Is it something that you kind of focus on with some of the players and work on in practice and things of that nature? And as a hockey player myself, who has probably a lot of room to grow myself, what tips do you usually offer people, just from an experience type of standpoint?
Yeah, it is a big part of my role. The development piece is huge. And just today alone, like we have 30 to 45 minutes before every practice open ice, and almost the whole team comes out for skill development, skating development before practice. So the guys are here, they want to work, they're hungry to learn, and they're eager, and it's a lot of fun. For me, obviously, having that investment in the players on board. So I spend a ton of time making sure that, we're doing the right things developmentally, putting more tools in their tool belt. Ultimately, the way I see it, to your point, is these players have been skating the same way their entire careers, regardless whether they're 19 or 30 years old. Where they fall on that, it's, teaching skating at this point in the career is more so fine-tuning the areas of their game of where their skating is either holding them back or can set them apart. And so I look at their game as a whole, and I'm finding ways to add value in the finer areas, whether that's in linear directions, lateral directions, mostly on the puck, but also off the puck, and getting them to understand their game and how, accelerating certain areas of their own individual skills focus can separate them and obviously collectively add to the team's value. So in the product we put on the ice. So that's what I approach with the players in these skills sessions, whether it's in small groups or larger team settings.
Now, you kind of touched on this a little bit in my first question too, but I want to dive in just a little bit more. But I talked to Dan Bylsma shortly after he was named head coach of the Firebirds. And I asked him, because, we didn't know who was going to be on his coaching staff yet. So I wanted to know what qualities he was looking for in those people. So he had mentioned that he was looking for someone who was passionate, intelligent, a good communicator. And then he said, quote, someone who is going to do anything and everything they can to help out the players in getting to their ultimate goal, which is the National Hockey League. So how do you feel knowing that you've ticked those boxes and got that vote of confidence from someone with his resume and someone that, you already knew and had worked with before?
Yeah, for me, obviously, the opportunity to work under Dan Bylsma and work for him and with him every day is not something I take lightly. Obviously, I see it as a huge opportunity, but I truly believe that I do belong here and that I bring exactly that. I'm confident in what I believe in, what I can teach these players. I've done it with, some of the best players in the National Hockey League, from, rookies to veterans. And those players, the Brent Seabrooks, the Shea Webbers, the Matt Barzels that I've had the opportunity to be on the ice with, all of the confidence came from working with those players in the past. And so I take my experience and the communication and the detail and all of what I've learned from them, working with them, guiding those guys, and I just bring it directly to our players. And I take a lot of pride in trying to be a tireless worker, for sure. It's been a fun journey, but I have had to work really hard to get to where I've gotten. And I'm grateful that Dan saw that value in me. And I always say to him, I'm most useful the more I'm on the ice. So the longer the ice we have, the more I'm out there, until the last player wants to get off the ice. That's where I want to be. And then obviously I want to study, learn, and grow as much as I can and just be a sponge every day. But I do believe that the detail and the communication that I can bring to the team and to our guys with our special teams as well is an area that allows me to set myself apart.
Jessica, obviously Coachella Valley and by extension Seattle are, brand new franchises kind of still getting their feet under them. Have there been any unique challenges or positives that you and the Firebirds have faced in forming your roster and system from the top down in an organization in its infancy, maybe other than not skating in your own barn just quite yet?
I wouldn't say there's been many challenges. I think we're all very excited. We're very much aligned, obviously, with the Kraken, working together of accomplishing the same thing. And it's, you guys already kind of hit on it. We're trying every day to do the best that we can to develop these players to the National Hockey League. So actually, I think the greatest thing about our situation right now, starting our season off here, though we would love to have our home in Coachella and we're excited about it, is we're right next door to the Kraken staff. And being here in the facility, these players, they want eyes on them and they've got eyes on them at all times, right? And so it's seeing the bigger picture. And obviously we have all the resources we need and an unbelievable facility to support them with. So it definitely hasn't held us back. And I think it'll give us that little boost when we get back to Coachella and to California, to our home, where the guys can get really excited about taking that next step. So it's been awesome for our players, for sure.
Take me back to rural Saskatchewan and growing up and playing hockey there. I'm sure that you must have had a lot of kind of support from your family as well from the hockey community. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I grew up in a very, very small town, only about 1,000 people, Rocanville, Saskatchewan, and then moved to Melville, which was more of a hockey community for any of the Millionaire fans that ever hear this, because they seem to be everywhere. But for me, I grew up playing obviously boys hockey. There was no competitive girls hockey, 20 years ago, and so I was very, very fortunate to have great coaches early on that treated me as an equal. And I think it instilled a confidence and a belief in me as a young girl playing among the boys to truly believe that, whatever I was good at, whatever I loved, whatever I was passionate about, just go and do it. I seen myself as equal and I was treated as equal. So I think that instilled a belief in me as a young kid and carried into my coaching career now. Especially being in the situation that I am. And so I really pride myself on, the values and the character and all of the things that came out of the prairies for me, because they're small town people. They're just the community support, and going home is always a special feeling, because everyone's been behind both my playing career and now my coaching career. It's always a celebration. And I truly feel like I'm always representing something far more than myself when I'm with a team or a staff or a group at the level of Coachella. And I actually, my family, my mom is coming down this weekend, and just the excitement, in her voice, coming to an NHL game and seeing me on the other side now, being a fan, of our team and being a part of this journey. It's just something that I take, with full heart. And it's always a special place for me to go back to the prairies.
And then bringing it back to your current role with the Coachella Valley Firebirds, can you share your initial thoughts on the roster and how they are performing so far this early in the season?
Yeah, we're happy. I think there's tons of areas to grow. Probably any coach in this situation would say the same thing. We're working through, building our identity and what we want to see as a product on the ice consistently every night. But I think from offensive side, defensive side, goaltending, we have all the parts that we need to be a contending team and a dominant team in the league. Definitely, we have veterans, we have rookie talent, we have the international combination of everything that we believe we need. And so now it's just putting all those parts together and obviously getting our special teams going. I think they're doing a really good job right now. So it's been a lot of fun with the short weeks that we've had, but we're looking to gear up and really ramp things going to get things going as we move into California and these next games ahead of us.
Now, coming off the Chicago Wolves beat over here, and as the president of the #JusticeForPots movement, I think all of us felt that Andrew Podorowski had kind of finally ascended into the NHL with a one-way deal with the Kraken. But as we've kind of found out, the NHL isn't always fairy tale endings and good vibes. I'm sure Potts isn't one to kind of openly appear upset or disappointed, but now that he's here with the Firebirds, what's kind of the message been to him from the coaching staff and, this tough reality of pro sports? And what does having a guy like him that's accomplished everything at this level really bring to the lineup and in the locker room?
Yeah, and it's a good point, because obviously a lot of respect for what he's accomplished, especially in the American Hockey League, and he's respected among his peers for sure. And he brings that leadership every day for us and that experience. But I think for Andrew, the biggest thing is just to continue doing what he does best and look at his game. And we've talked with all of our players about looking at the finer details of their game and consistently doing that, because for him, it's not a matter of if he's capable or not. It's a matter of when and those opportunities. And that's sport, unfortunately, and regardless of what organization. But I think for him, he's hungry. He's I think probably has a fire in him more than ever before, because he's capable and he has all the skills and the tools. So I'm excited to support him. Our staff is very excited to support him every day to get him there and to hopefully see a sad goodbye to Andrew at some point. But I think he's right where he needs to be, and his mindset is right where it needs to be. So we're there to support him and to do everything we can to keep him on the path where he wants to get to.
One final question. Any advice for anyone that might be thinking about going into a possible career path in professional hockey, and especially a coaching role?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who's, whether they're have the same aspirations as I do, or younger athletes, hearing this message is if it's something you love and you're passionate about it and it makes you tick, then go after it. Listen to that feeling. But for me, I never saw a female coach before, so I never believed in this dream and this, vision of mine until I just did it. I just said, I love to do this, and I love teaching, skating and skills. And so it's following that pursuit and that passion and that gut feeling, whatever it is career-wise. But I think for any young girls or boys in this position that have those aspirations, that same feeling is don't see the barriers. Don't put the focus on any of the barriers that are around you, though they may be there. If you put your focus there, that's where your energy goes. And I've tried to keep my focus strictly on the goals in front of me and to be a sponge, to get better every day, to learn every day, to surround myself with intelligent, hardworking people and ask questions and to not be afraid to ask questions, because that's the only way you're going to continue to grow. And I think if you do that, then you never know how quickly you can get to where you want to get to.
Well, Jessica, thank you again so much for your time this afternoon. Everything has been really enlightening. I love your advice and just your general viewpoint on the sport, the team, and on behalf of all my co-hosts, I just want to say thank you again and best of luck to your team as the season goes forward.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Now we're going to talk about who is hot on the AHL ice this past week and who is not. Now, Corey, we're going to have you start off here in the Atlantic Division.
All right, so I had a fun weekend writing about the Springfield Thunderbirds, and I'm sure their fans are recovering from probably one of the weirdest 3 games in 3 nights that I've ever remembered seeing, at least that I can think of off the top of my head. But in terms of who's hot, it's the Springfield Thunderbirds offense. They've gotten big performances from all the right guys. And it was something that I know I said earlier on in the season when they were struggling on this podcast before. And all the guys that I said needed to step up have stepped up. So Nikita Alexandrov had his first career hat trick on Friday in a 7-6 overtime win. That's right, you heard that right. 7-6 in overtime. The teams traded leads multiple times in the course of that game. But Alexandrov's hat trick was not enough for him to earn the first star in that game, as it went to overtime, and Martin Ferk scored his first goal with the Thunderbirds as the winner. He had a 4-point night. Even though he and Alexandrov had 4 points each, they still gave it to him for the winner, I believe. But, just some big nights in terms of points. Nathan Todd's currently atop the AHL in terms of goals right now. Will Bitton scored goals in almost any conceivable way. Shorthanded, you name it, he's probably done it this past weekend. It's no surprise they were able to put up as many goals and, get 5 out of 6 points because they're able to put the puck in the net. But you hear that music coming. It's Vinny Lettieri. He's here to ruin Springfield's day. And who's not? It's Springfield's defense. Their defense has been horrible. They have blown 2-0 leads in all 3 of those games. They went up 2-0 and lost it at different points in the game. Vinny Lettieri was responsible for, ruining their games on both Saturday and Sunday. He had goals that were, incredibly important goals, as well as in both games that went to shootouts. He also scored 2 goals in shootouts in both those games. One was good enough for the win. One was not quite good enough for a win, unfortunately. But he's, I'm loving him for my fantasy team, but, I'm sure that Springfield's not loving him very much there. But, Springfield, if there was a lead they had, they lost it. I mean, I believe that, and I put some of the stats here in my script to remind me of it, and I'm not seeing them all of a sudden because they're on a different page. But Springfield gave up 10 power play opportunities on Sunday, including a nearly full 2-minute 5-on-3 power play that Lettieri scored twice on, and they were outshot 17-3 in the third period on Saturday, and surrendered a 6-3 lead on Friday, only to recover it for that 7-6 win. I mean, I should say it's a 5-3 lead that they blew, and then, won 7-6 in. And, a win's a win at the end of the day, but they're the kind of games that if you're a Springfield fan, I feel that your hair is turning gray while you're watching it.
I totally forgot that Marty Ferk was in the Atlantic Division now. It seemed like for so long he was out there in the Pacific on that Ontario Reign team, and yeah, good for him. But we're going to turn our divisions just a little bit west, going to the North Division. Now, guys, I know I brought him up last week, but again, Jamel Smith is absolute lightning in a bottle for the Crunch. See what I did there? Yeah. Oh, that was bad. Okay. Anyway, so take a look at this first clip here. Secondary assist on a Trevor Carrick goal, which is just watch this. This is the flukiest I meant to do that-iest goal of the season. A little hop gets right past the goaltender there. And there he goes, finally celebrating. And then moving on to the second assist of the weekend, also a secondary, but I love his tenacity here. Syracuse is down by 3 late in the game. He is surrounded by 3 monsters, yet he still managed to get control in the offensive zone, get a clean pass past 2 sticks, through traffic to Alex Barré-Boulet on the blue line. Then, boom, Darren Radish. Once again, those two teaming up for a goal. But anyway, his assists and point streak is now up to 7 games with 3 goals and 7 assists for 10 points. Just a quick reminder, that takes him back to the beginning of the season. So this is going from, as we're recording this, November 1st, all the way back to October the 14th. Tied with him on the streak count is Providence's Luke Toporowski. Just fun fact there. Now, Jamel Smith has already eclipsed his points total for last year in the American Hockey League in 9 fewer games. His career high in the league is 40 points, both in back-to-back years, 2018-19 and 2019-20. First with Providence and then with Syracuse. I'm just wondering, could this potentially be a career year for him? Time will tell. But who's not in the North? The Belleville Senators outside of the North Division. They are currently 0-2 against the Atlantic, 0-2 against the Central. But when playing North Division foes, they are 3-0 with 1 overtime loss. My question is, do you think we see a petition from them to only play in division here soon?
I think their schedule will be quite fortuitous for them going forward here. And as we move a little further out west, I know we talked about him earlier, but I don't think he got enough recognition. So I'm going to go right back to David Gust, because I don't know if anyone was hotter than him this past weekend with 7 points, and including a 5-point performance against his former team and the Chicago Wolves. So there he is on a breakaway, and he just buries it. And the Wolves were very familiar with this all summer long when Gus was playing hero in the Calder Cup finals for him. And he's just right back at it with a hot start here in Rockford. And his name's up there at the top of the leaderboard. You wonder if he was motivated for that one. I think so. But who's not? Well, a lovable underdog story from just 2 years ago, Anton Hudobin. He did not have the best stretch this weekend. And, Dobby was a free elf on Sunday, courtesy of the Grand Rapids Griffins, sending him home after 4 goals on 11 shots. And he just really didn't look comfortable in the crease, as you'll see here in this goal by Austin Zarnik. He completely guesses the wrong way where the puck's going to go. Had difficulty tracking it. Didn't have a lot of control on his rebounds. Just didn't. Sometimes you just don't have it. And we all love Dobby. He's still a legend, especially down there in Texas. But 9 goals in a game and a half of action. That's a not. I'm sorry.
Giving me some late Devin Dubnyk vibes as well, with just trouble tracking the puck. But you know what? In the Pacific Division, I'm honestly loving some of that Tucson content, because they've been doing really good. And who's been doing good is Michael Carcone. Yeah, I mean, 8 assists through the first 5 games. Those of you on YouTube are seeing a highlight from a beautiful beautiful point here through the first 5 games. A point per game player going all the way back to mid-October, and that's the longest point per game streak in the AHL right now. So he's got 3 goals also on that list for 11 points. And for me, who's not hot, I'm looking at the Henderson Silver Knights, and more specifically, their goaltending. But, all the same, who's not hot on that team? In net, Yuri Petera has been holding a .887 save percentage, a 3.04 goals against average. Now, they did put up a valiant fight against Colorado, but, as we've seen there in that clip, there was a lot of shots where they were just coming in from outside of the circles, and we're not talking about the passes across or anything like that where there's just a guy open. We're talking about just simple shots from the point that weren't really stopped. And so So when we talk about that 3.04 number, that means that your team has to score 4 goals. And when your team is 28th in goals for in the league, it's kind of hard to do that. And their backup hasn't really been doing them much good either in Michael Hutchinson, who had a really great AHL stint in Toronto, didn't have such a well stint with the Maple Leafs, but in his first 2 games at 3.0 goals against average as well, and the saves percentage of 88%. So just not really what you want to see from their goaltending, who's really not helping their 2-6 record heading out of week 3 now.
So circling back to Devan Dubnyk, of course, just got to talk about him real quick. He recently, within the last few days, announced his retirement from the playing career, now trying his hand at broadcasting, I saw. But of course, he spent some time in the American Hockey League over 6 years, played 144 games with a 3.05 goals against average, a 906 save percentage, 3 shutouts, and a 46, 83, and 4 record. Of course, that's on top of all of his time, well over 500 games in, across 12 seasons in the NHL and multiple other leagues. So congratulations on a nice long career to Mr. Dubnyk, and wishing him well in the future.
There was a time in St. John's. I will tell one very quick story, but there was a time in St. John's where he was about yay close to making another AHL run between Dustin Tokarski and him, and he just got traded the day that he was going to be sent down. So that's a little bit of AHL trivia for you.
I love the deep dives like that. It's a nice deep cut AHL trivia. There you go. All right, now that we talked about who is hot on an individual level, it is time to talk about the team level in the race for the Holy GrAHL. Just like last time, we are going to start in the Atlantic Division.
Well, I have to say, I don't know that anybody had Wilkes-Barre Scranton as being the only team at this point in the season to have a points percentage over 900. I believe it's the only team left in the league to have such a percentage, but they've had about as phenomenal of a start as I think you could possibly hope for. They're 6-0-1. They've won 6 games in a row, and they've, outside of a little bit of a stinker with their first game against Lehigh Valley of all teams, they've been unflappable almost. And, Dustin Tokarski was, I believe, named one of the AHL's 3 stars of the month, if I'm not mistaken, on that. So it's either the month or the week at this point.
Month.
I think it was month, but you got Wilkes-Barre and Bridgeport, 2 of the teams that were among the last teams to make it in the playoffs last year are number 1 and 2, here in the early going of the season. So a little bit of a surprise. You still see, Springfield still recovering from, their early struggles here, even though they're 4-0 and 0-1 in their last 5 games. And, you got some teams I think are coming on. I mean, Hartford's won 2 in a row. Hershey's got points in 2 straight, 3 out of 6 on the weekend there. Those are teams that I would kind of keep an eye on as teams on the rise at this point. I would take the over on Charlotte, surprisingly struggling a little bit after being knocked off their perch as undefeated a little bit there. They've had points in 2 of 3. So it's a little bit interesting to see how it's shaping up, and it's hard to not, obviously can't forget Providence there, number 3. They're 5-1-1-1. So it's an interesting race shaping up so far because you got teams like Hershey that I think are, kind of coming on at this point. But only time will tell. I think it's still too early to declare somebody a winner, but I would probably take away my biggest takeaway in the Atlantic is Wilkes-Barre being the real deal because I don't think a lot of people had them as such to start the season for sure.
And you are correct. Dustin Tokarski taking goaltender of the month honors here in the American Hockey League. And then just to kind of round that out real quick, Jesper Froden of the Coachella Valley Firebirds taking player of the month. And then Bridgeport's Ruslan Ishkakov. There we go. Rookie of the Month awards. I mean, come on, 7 games played, 7 assists, 4 goals. He's starting out pretty well, I think. But we're going to go ahead and turn our sights to the north here. And this time of the season is so much fun, isn't it? I mean, teams are jockeying for position and are really trying to solidify themselves as the front runner of their division. Now, last week in the north, we saw a top 4 of Rochester, Cleveland, Belleville, and Toronto. Now, that's all been jumbled around like letters in a game of Boggle over the past week, and I am praying that I did not date myself with that reference. Is Boggle still played? I don't know. But Toronto now leading the North thanks to a 3-game winning streak. Rochester, of course, hanging close in second place there, with Cleveland and Belleville bringing up the 3rd and 4th spots. The bottom 3 of Syracuse, Laval, and Utica do remain unchanged from last week. But what's really perplexing about this division is that only the top and bottom team have a positive goals differential here. Now, Toronto is a +4, Utica is a +2. Everybody else, that aren't those bookend teams, range from a -4 to a -8. Honestly, if they don't turn that around, Utica might just make a run past them once they start stringing a few wins together.
And as we move over into the Central, guess who's at the top? It's another familiar face. That's right. The Manitoba Moose with a 5-1-1 record. They hold on to their crown, but coming in at number 2, those pesky Texas Stars. Splitting that weekend series with Grand Rapids this weekend. They with 9 points. They're still just a couple behind, but looking over their shoulders, the Milwaukee Admirals with 3 straight wins and actually a higher points percentage. This team they're kind of a slow start to get going, but they're cooking now. And I mean, I think this team has the potential to possibly take the entire thing. But again, it's still early. Coming in at 4th, Grand Rapids Griffins. They've been kind of going really back and forth, so their 4-3 record kind of reflects that. As we round it out, the Rockford Ice Hogs are at 500 at 3-3. Defending champion Chicago Wolves, they're still kind of finding their footing, 2-3-1. And again, it's kind of, same as it ever was here with the Iowa Wild at 1-3-2 down at the basement. They did get a win this weekend, though. They did beat Manitoba. So, stranger things can happen.
That's a good one to win too.
That's a big split for that Wild. I maybe that'll give them some confidence to really get going because I mean, you don't want to see them down there all season, do you? I mean, maybe. It's not the Cody McLeod Wild anymore. It's a different Wild team.
Depends on who you cheer for, I guess. Only Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, the Penguins have a better winning percentage than Ontario and Tucson in the Pacific Division, who have only lost 1 game through 5 and 6 games to start off the season, respectively, with Ontario taking that top spot. Looking down the line, it's San Jose, Coachella Valley, and Abbotsford, who have all had pretty nice starts to the season. Colorado, San Diego, and Bakersfield make up the middle of the pack. And the bottom feeders that we kind of talked about a little bit before in the show are Calgary with a 2-4 record and Henderson with a 2-6 record. Calgary and the second place Tucson Roadrunners in the Pacific Division will clash We clashed on Wednesday. We'll clash again on Friday night. So it's not looking real good for making up some more wins. And Henderson will take on Bakersfield this weekend. So maybe a chance to kind of squeeze something out of the middle. But all the same, pivotal games for them to try to get some points within the division and try to stack up a little bit. So we'll have to see what happens after this weekend.
I thought we were done with all the winning percentage talk, but I guess not.
I know it's not correct, but it's a good way to kind of see, especially starting out early on in the season where the sample size is relatively small. I mean, losing one game can really be a huge difference in the points column right now.
Oh, for sure. I just cringe thinking back to all the math that we had
won the
to
whole
do.
season like this, and now we have to change. Change is not good.
Change isn't always easy. That's for sure. Now that we've seen how the teams have been performing, it's time to look ahead with our game of the week picks.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me in the Atlantic, we talked a little bit about Wilkes-Barre a couple of times here. So for me, it's going to be a pair of games, a home and home set, no less, between the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins and the Hershey Bears. Partially because the two teams already played each other this past Saturday, and it was a very entertaining, low-scoring game between the Bears and the Penguins. Went to overtime. The two goaltenders, Hunter Shepard and Philip Lindbergh, were trading grade A saves for a little bit in overtime. A little bit of a downer of an ender, just the way the overtime goal went in. It was a little anticlimactic for all the good action we saw there. So I'm rooting for these two games here to be very entertaining. I'll obviously be at the game on Sunday in Hershey. There's a lot of storylines to watch out for as the Bears will look to put an L in the column for Wilkes-Barre in regulation for the first time this season. So there's one team to do it. I think that's the rivalry. I think that's the matchup to do it. So I'm very excited for those two games.
For me in the North, I know this is going to be a 13-game night on Saturday. So this is kind of a tall ask for you all, but might I entice you to watch Rochester versus Utica? I mean, this is going to be the this is going to be the back half of a home and home series for these two teams, plus the third game in 4 days for Utica. Now, if the Comets' rhythm of winning every other game holds true here, then this is going to be a much needed victory for the Comets. Plus, they're 2-1, 0-0 at home. So, I mean, it's something else going in their favor here. Plus, this is a double trouble scenario where you have both a regional rival and a divisional show. Oh my gosh. Plus a divisional foe showing up in your house. Now, this is going to be absolutely on one of my several monitors in my little hockey watching setup this weekend.
I'm going to go for the end of the weekend matchup here in Central, which would be the second one of the series between Texas and Manitoba. Now, as of right now, tonight, Tuesday night, these are the two big dogs in division at the moment. You know, Texas, I think they kind of dropped a game on Sunday that maybe they should have had against the Griffins. And the Moose, you know, they've been rolling early on the first month of the season. And anytime you get a 1 versus 2, it's a statement for both sides. Manitoba to hold the crown, Texas to prove that, you know, last year kind of not really a great season for them. Barely snuck into the playoffs, lost to Rockford. Here's your chance to show that, hey, this is going to be different, and you're here to play. So I'm going to be tuning in.
Yeah, and you know what? For all you late birds out there, give me Ontario and Colorado. Ontario has proven themselves to be a really strong competitive team this year. And like we said, it was only Wilkes-Barre Scranton that has a better record than them right now in the points percentage wise, a 6-1 record. You know, Colorado has been kind of hovering around that middle of the pack era. You know, they're not out of playoff contention by no means. And we've seen how strong of a dominant team that they can be last year. And I really do think that they could probably pull out a win in this weekend series. So I'm very curious to see how Colorado comes out in this, especially after going with a nice weekend against Henderson. So we'll have to see what happens on that end in the Pacific Division.
And one other game you can pick up, it's the AHL's free game of the week between the Milwaukee Admirals and the San Diego Gulls, squaring off in San Diego at 7 o'clock p.m. Pacific, or if you're like me, live on the East Coast, that's 10 o'clock Eastern. So that's your free game of the week. It should be an entertaining one between two pretty good teams there for sure.
And we also have AHL action this weekend on the Field Pass Hockey app. This weekend matchup is Charlotte versus Syracuse. And that's at Friday at 7 Eastern and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern time, only on the Field Pass Hockey app. Download it now on the Google Play stores as well as the Apple Store.
Beautiful, Zach. You tee that up so well. The check will be in the mail.
The check is always in the mail. I get paid by the click, y'all.
Paid by the click, paid by the mention. We got you. All right, to finish up this show this week, we are heading into the bonus round, and Corey is taking his first stab at hosting this section. So Corey, take it away.
I appreciate it. Well, it wouldn't be me if I wasn't bringing some Hershey Bears trivia to the table here. It's the 85th anniversary season of the Hershey Bears, and so I have a good one for you guys. So my guy, Nathan Walker, ranks 47th all-time in Hershey Bears history with 300 games played. One of 47 players to achieve that milestone. Can you name another player that has hit 300 games played as a Bear?
Chris Bork.
That's an easy one there. Yep, he's the top American goal scorer, top American in that category with 604 games played. Bonus points if you can name a player who could join that group this coming season. If he plays in the right amount of games this season.
How many games?
300.
Part of me wants to say Fucale.
Not quite Fucale.
That would be a lot of games for a goalie.
Yeah, I guess.
So just with Hershey or overall?
Just with Hershey, just as a Bear. I thought that question was going to be a little bit harder for the overall, honestly. Chris Bork's reputation precedes him, though.
Yeah, we've mentioned him before on this pod, so...
If you could name a player outside of Chris Bork, that's the other challenge there too, for sure. Because there are a couple of players from the quote unquote modern era of the Bears that fit this bill outside of Walker.
Dave Steckel?
Let me consult my list here. I don't believe he has played not that many games.
I'm not gonna Google this.
I don't know.
No, he's not.
Many Hershey Bears players. Like the only one I'm thinking of right now would be Shane Gersick. I doubt that's him.
Not quite, although he's getting closer.
What about
Scarbosa?
That was gonna be my guess.
Not quite Scarbosa. He's in the running eventually. Deana, you should be very familiar with the guy that I'm thinking of, though. Considering if I'm going to give it away here, he's
Aaron
on
Ness?
your fantasy team. Aaron Ness, that's the man.
Hey, there we go. I got one. But honestly, I think the point goes to Andrew there because he had that one right off the bat.
Yes, there are a couple other players from the modern era, I always say in quotes, that fit that bill, aside from Chris Bork. Garrett Mitchell and Liam O'Brien are a couple of the regulars from that era, alongside Nathan Walker, that made that list. Some Hershey Bears staples in their history include Mike Nikolak, who is the all-time leader at 972 games played. Surprisingly, Mr. Hershey Bears himself, Frank Mathers, barely ranks in 2 spots ahead of Nathan Walker at 309. So he spent more time as a player, or as a coach, I should say, and manager rather than a player, which is a surprising bit of Bears trivia there, I believe.
All right. Well, Andrew takes another round this week, so we'll see what he has for us here in a week. But that's going to be it for the Holy Grail for this episode. If you'd like to see or hear more of us, please subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Also, be sure to follow us over on Twitter at the Holy GrAHL. And remember, that's GrAHL. You can also check out all of Field Pass Hockey's other podcasts, including Inside the SPHL with James Hayes. You can join Matthew Harding and Jason Malls as they break down the ECHL's Wichita Thunder and chat with some of the team's legendary players on the Rolling Thunder podcast. Now, that podcast airs bi-weekly here at Field Pass Hockey. Of course, we also have Syracuse Speaks with Alexander Ackerman. Of course, that is a Syracuse Crunch-centric podcast. And then sometime soon, hopefully, of course, you notice that Jeremy isn't here. He is actually on his way to Finland to catch the Blue Jackets and the Colorado Avalanche in the Global Series game over in Finland. So we wish him safe travels there. But once he gets back, we're going to finalize some plans for Monsters Musings, try to get that out to you guys here real soon. But on behalf of all of us here at the Holy GrAHL, we hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll see you all next Thursday. Bye.
This has been the Holy GrAHL Podcast. Have a question or a topic suggestion? Hit us up on Twitter or drop us an email. For the latest news across the American Hockey League and the rest of minor league hockey, download the Field Pass Hockey app, now available in the Apple and Android app stores.
Have a goal horn, which their home club doesn't have.
Oh, they don't?
They don't? Really?
They don't. I legitimately saw highlights of I forget, I think it was Christian Fisher scored in their home opener against Winnipeg, and there was no goal horn. It's just a bad look, man. It's a bad look.
Yep.
Officially, the Bears don't have a goal horn either, believe it or not, or like an actual horn.
Horn.
They just play a video loudly over, a knockoff Rangers goal horn, and that's kind of been it. I can't tell you how many times I
noticed that looking at the Bobby Nardella goal, because he's the son of the Wolves assistant, and I was like, I know I've heard that name before, and he scored, and I'm like, wait, that's the MSG horn. Like, what? Come on, Hershey, you're not even affiliated with the Rangers. But
yeah, they picked that up one year. They used to have a goal siren. They've gone through a couple of different. But for a while, when I was a kid, they had nothing, and then they kind of picked that horn up randomly. And people complain every year to me, when is Hershey going to get a real goal horn? When are they going to change that? I'm like, I don't know, man. I really don't know. I like everything they do except that they don't have an actual horn.
And it's Nuremberg. It's the
Nuremberg. Yeah, I had read the first time.
Yeah. Makes it look more intimidating, but it's just
the
Nuremberg.
fact that that's actually called an umlaut just made my heart smile. So
I know a lot of Germans, so
that's because it's on the thing of the yogurt.
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The Deutsche Eishockey Liga. Okay.
All we're doing is creating more content for the blooper reels. So
we can't make it that. Well, I guess this one would go in 2 weeks or a week from now. So, but I can't make Zach the constant feature of our blooper reel.